Hey guys, welcome to my review of Final Fantasy X HD Remaster, because I'm playing it on the PS4. I never played the original. But anyway, we're doing this review following completion of the main story. I've got other bits still to do. There's all the post-game stuff that I'm hopefully going to do, all the high-powered stuff. Anyway, so we're going to do this now because I think it's most important after we've done the main bit, the rest of it. Yeah, it's difficult. It's like a hard mode sort of thing. But anyway, I want to thank you for all the support on the series while I played the game. Thank you ever so much. Please go watch it if you've not seen it. I mean, why are you watching the review if you've not watched the series? But please subscribe to the channel if you have not, because we've got plenty more games, including Final Fantasy VII, the original, that I'm just about to start. But yes, this is the first effectively PS2 Final Fantasy that I've ever played. I never played it originally, never ended up buying it. So yeah, for me it was a very new experience, but I was very excited to play for it. There's been quite a few changes since the 9 preceding it. I think this for me showed the biggest changes of all the games as you went through. So I think it's a very good place to start in gameplay, and then we'll do story after. So it's still basically turn-based, but you didn't have the active time gauge as you did in the previous sort of games, and it felt not as structured in a way. The way that even though you had a list of all the characters which players they would be doing, it also moved depending on the actual move you used, because some of them had like a bigger recharge time. So I think that was really good. I enjoyed that. It made it feel a bit more exciting, a bit more action based. You could also change the characters out, which was a new thing. In all the previous ones, you kind of had your party set, right? But if I was a 10, you could move your characters in, out, and then only the ones that took part and did something got sort of experience. They called it AP, but it's experience. And then what it did do is each character sort of had their specific role that kind of was their maybe job. If you want to say it like that. Lulu was a black mage. Yuna was meant to be a white mage. Kamari blue mage. Sir Oren was like a knight physical fighter. That kind of thing. And then certain enemies required you to use certain characters. Winged enemies could not get hit by like Sir Oren. He wouldn't be able to hit them, or some of them wouldn't really be affected by magic, which is different. Most games of previous Final Fantasy games, nearly all the characters could hit nearly all the enemies. So that was a little bit different. It added like a little bit of a layer, especially at the start when your character's not that strong. Towards the end, there was only actually sort of niche enemies that really certain characters couldn't hit. Once they get to a certain power, they kind of just could do enough damage, so it didn't really matter who you used. I liked it in principle. It was interesting. It made you think. So I think for me, to start with, it was interesting. But the leveling up way it works then seemed a bit of a drag, because you effectively have your whole party for the whole game. There's a few bits where somebody's not quite there all the time, but you would have to swap them in and out. And it meant towards the end you kind of had your party. You knew who you were going to use. There might be Yuna might come in to do white magic, or Lulu might come in to do black magic, but generally, I think most people end up using basically Waka, Sir Aaron, and then either sort of Tidus or Kamari, depending on what you do, because the characters merge a little bit more. But it does bring me on to the next bit, which is the sphere grid, which was the very new thing in Final Fantasy X. So obviously, normally, experience, you level up and your stats grow pretty linear. Like sometimes you can attach equipment and you would get a boost in certain kind of stats, but not in this game. You got nothing if you basically leveled up, and it was called, you got AP and then you sphere leveled up. So they got you a sphere grid move, and then you could pick what stats you wanted. Now every character started in a kind of area that worked for them, but I would say about halfway through the game, you've probably pretty much got everything for everyone. Not so much maybe Lulu and Yuna. The magic ones had a little bit more, but like the physical guys, they kind of learned all their stuff, and then you'd move on to another character's grid, and then obviously the physical guys probably stay with the physical ones. But like Kamari and Tidus, for me, I made a bit more Magic, I got them like the time magic sort of stuff. Whereas Whacker and Zeraran just kind of swapped around each other. Um, and so then you could like create whatever you wanted. If you wanted, you could have Zeraran as your white mage and Yuna as your fighter. If you really wanted to. But their equipment wouldn't mix. The equipment was focused. But, you know, Yuna give her a load of strength and she could do it, I reckon. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe she could. But, like, I feel like you needed something like Experience All because, like I say, you sort of developed your own team and you focused on your team. So then bringing in the weaker characters they were, because they didn't have as many sphere levels, you would, you know, it was harder to then fight the strong enemies using those characters. So then it was harder to level up. So then you bring your stronger characters in again. And it just made battles sometimes really long. If you could kill an enemy in like one hit, but you specifically needed to get all your characters, the AP, you had to bring them in, and then you had to use stupid moves to waste the turn so that you could then bring another character in. And that for me, where I am now, where I need to go and do sort of like leveling up and grinding, it's not, I'm not looking forward to it. I'm going to be honest, not really looking forward to it. But anyway, you know, obviously the main game you don't have to get sort of max levels. But to do the stuff that I want to do, like the Monster Arena and the Dark Aeons, and then do all the ultimate weapons and things like that, you do need to be more powerful. And, you know, you have to grind a little bit. You have to get all the AP and do the sphere grid. And then it's not only you move around the sphere grid and you pick what you want, you then have to sort of go back to the start and remove some and replace them with more powerful, sort of like strength +4 instead of strength +1. You know what I mean? Like more power, more potent levels to level up with. And you have to do it strategically and to get the equipment you need to do that, like the spheres, the delete ones and things like that. Oh my god, you have to fight really strong enemies, and then but to do that you have to power it up, and I don't know, it feels like a lot of effort, but I'm going to do it for you guys because you're awesome. So I'm going to do it. It's just going to take me maybe a little bit of time because I think I might have made a few mistakes while I was along the way. But anyway, well, like I say, for the main game, you don't have to do that. You can basically just stick with your characters and then move to like maybe a similar one. You know, I reckon you don't even have to match your own character like on their own sphere grid. I reckon you probably don't have to. It's more about learning the moves, I think, in the main game rather than the stats and the attributes. But yeah, there's like loads of new skills they've had in this game. That is one thing. So normally you'd have like certain abilities that have appeared before. I mean, dual cast has appeared in lots of other games, lots of Final Fantasy games. But things like steal and mug, so you'd learn that. But there was things like quick hit, so you'd use a load of MP, but you'd definitely hit them first. Or like armor break, so you'd remove their armor. Like, you know, the opposite of protect on you, you remove their protect in a way, but their standard protect. Things like sleep hit, where if they're able to be hit by sleep, you're guaranteed to hit them, but it only lasts for like 3 turns. And there's all these extra moves which at the start were really exciting. I was like, oh my god, yes. But then you don't use them. Sorry, I'm sorry. I know you can use them, and like it's a bit like Pokemon. There's all these really good moves. Most people don't use them. It ends up being a bit OTT, to be honest with you. You know, it sounds great and it's always exciting, and the developers really probably great putting it in. But what it does do, then oh my god, it's like I planned this and written down my review. But it leads me into sort of talking about gimmick bosses, which I think this game had far more of. So you had all these extra sort of new moves and things that you could use and that would do sort of effects that normally you don't really always see in Final Fantasy. You know, the sleep obviously you do see, but you use it as a black magic rather than like a physical attack. Unless you, we're going a bit too far. But like normally most bosses you can just attack and use magic on. In this game, there was lots of bosses where if you did that, they would do some horrific counterattack and it'd like obliterate you. So you had to know what to do, or you had to know what armor to have on to be able to beat them. You know, a lot of the underwater bosses would put petrify on you, so you're a stone, and then boom, sing like a stone, obviously. But if you had stone protection, you basically destroyed them. Their only move was gone. The worst one was Sanctuary Keeper. Oh my god, that one was horrific. I think but basically I found out after you have to like threaten him, so he pauses, and then if you remove the character, you swap the character out who threatened him, and like use an Aeon, he stays permanently frozen and can't do anything, and then you just batter him, and you're like, but if you don't, he uses his move that puts like nearly every status on you, and I was like, oh my god, it drove me mental because then he would heal himself and stuff, and then there's the one that gives you Berserk, and I don't. No, I'm not a massive fan because I enjoy it to play it. It's not necessary to have to pass a bloody test when I'm fighting a boss. If you know what I mean. Just for me, it was a little too many gimmicky bosses. There's always been like one in Final Fantasy where but it was usually if you did a certain thing, it made the boss a lot easier. Not you effectively had to do it, or it made it almost impossible. That was the difference. I always made the example of Omega weapon in Final Fantasy VIII. If you never learn the way the moves went, oh my god, it was difficult to win. But if you did, it's more possible. The weapons in Final Fantasy VII, like everyone used to say about Ruby, that you go in with 2 players taken out, and then he doesn't do that stupid move where he blows people away. So it was like those. But if you did that move, blew people away, you could still potentially win. You know what I mean? It's just that, and I don't really like it that much. I don't like those bits. But I understand many people will, and it added something different. And if you fail, you'd learn. Eventually, I would have eventually sort of done it, but I might fight the same boss 7 times. I mean, some games like Sonic Superstars, it took me forever to learn the boss. And oh my god. Oh. Anyway, but I've had my little rant. We'll go back to more serious stuff. But yeah, there's loads of changes. Final Fantasy X. Some good or different. Some not so good in my view. You might have all loved it. And I understand why they do them. But just for me and just the way I like games, it doesn't always work. It doesn't mean you don't like it. If you like it, let me know. Anyway, time for the main event, the story, which is obviously always the main thing for Final Fantasy games anyway. So I think it's right that we then talk about it. It's critical. So was this good? It's often held up as one of the best ever stories. But was it? Is it really? Spoilers, but who stop? Spoilers. Anyone who kind of is watching this without having played the game, spoilers. I found it a little confusing. I'm gonna be honest. I've done a little bit of digging. There's like the Final Fantasy wiki pages, very handy, very interesting actually, especially for all of them. All of them, read them. They lose hours reading that. Don't tell the boss. Oh my god. But I will try and break it down for you. So effectively, like 1,000 years ago, there was a great war between Bavel and Zanarkand. Bavel was like all machines and much more machine related. Zanarkand still was a bit more classic and magic and summoners. They're having a massive war, but Bavel got the upper hand, and we're closing on Zanarkand. So then the head of Zanarkand, Yevon, was like the ultimate summoner, the best summoner ever. And they decided to summon like the ultimate Aeon. I think it's sort of what it was. So what they did was they decided to use the power of everybody to summon it. That's why it'd be so much more powerful. And he effectively put everyone to sleep, and they dreamed, and the power of those dreams helped him create what they then called Sin, which is this massive, huge whale thing. Because it's a horrible looking thing, to be honest. It's not the best looking Aeon. But anyway, Bavel then won the war because obviously Zanarkand was like wiped out by themselves. But Sin was around, and no one could defeat Sin. And basically, Sin destroyed machines. If it detected like too much machines, it would destroy Sin, because that's obviously what Bavel was. It was all like machines. So here we go. I'm going to take you out. And it kind of kept the development of all of Spira, which is the world, behind. They could never get advanced because Sin would just destroy it. And then this sort of religion came out of it. They're the religion of Yevon, I think is what it's called. Anyway, and you would have to go on a pilgrimage by someone would have to go on a pilgrimage, get the power of all these other Aeons, and then they'd go and they'd find out they're going to have to die, which was always great for them. You would have to summon what's called the final Aeon. But what they didn't say is the final Aeon would effectively be like the person you care about the most. So there's all this emotion would go into it. And the summoner would die as well. And the two of them would like then create this really powerful Aeon who would then be able to beat Sin. But the problem is, Yevon had sort of created this magic, which then he would then go into this new summon and turn it into Sin. So there'd be a calm period where Sin was like growing again, but then he'd be back. So then some more summoners would have to go in and power. But everyone, was like, this is normal, So our team clearly is then going to be the ones that break this like system. It's always what happens. Okay, they're going to break what everyone thinks is the only way they can survive. And they go on this journey. And actually, Tidus, the main character, I believe it's Tidus. It never says his name in it because he's the only character you can name. So it never says his name, but I'm pretty sure it's Tidus and not Tidus. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere Tidus. Still a weird name, but he is actually a dream of. You find out it's I think in X2 Final Fantasy X-2. There's an actual person who looks like him. He was the dream character of them, so he doesn't really have their personality. He kind of has his own personality. It's a bit strange. These are the kind of details that I've not quite got, but he's the one who's then being sort of chosen, and he wakes up in the sort of current day, believing he's just been taken by Sin from Zanarkand that he was in. He wasn't even in the war. It was just a normal day. But it turns out that Zanarkand was a dream, in the dream world, and Sin basically brought him into the real world. It's not quite like that, but you kind of get the idea. He's there in the real world, but he thinks he's from Zanarkand. He doesn't realise all this has happened. So he's like, well, what's going on in this world? This is all weird. What? This makes no sense. I want to go to Zanarkand. And they're all like, Zanarkand's destroyed. You can't just go to Zanarkand. And obviously he does. But the story is kind of him falling in love with Yuna and him realising what's happening and then deciding, no, he can't see Yuna die. Weirdly, Yuna's dad was the last summoner to win. And it was Tidus's dad, or who he believes is his dad. Kind of doesn't explain that, whether it's actually the real Tidus as it was, whether it is actually his dad or something. But basically, Jet is his name. And they have to stop him, and well, they do. Kind of do it. But then with that destroyed and finally Sin defeated, the dream world can stop. And with the dream world stopped, that means Tidus goes. Bye-bye. Yeah. So at the end of it, it's possibly it's not dark, but it's the least happy Final Fantasy ending I think I've ever seen, where Tidus evaporates, he disappears. There's this weird clip where he sort of comes back and he potentially wakes up. I think they just probably added that for, I reckon, the Western audience, because the Japanese they love it like evil ending and stuff like that. So I think they just probably added that in, and really what they wanted was Tidus just to have disappeared. But it was quite a dark ending in reality. So it was a bit different. There is also this other guy in it called Seymour who. He wants to use Sin to keep the world destroyed. The problem is, he looks like he's going to be the big bad. You're kind of saying, he's going to be a bad guy. You're like, this guy's bad, we don't like this guy. And then he isn't. He kind of keeps coming up and cropping up and being like a big boss fight for you. And quite a hard boss fight, I'm not going to lie. Tries to marry Yuna, obviously. You don't need details on that. But the problem is, he isn't that big about it. It doesn't really matter to the story after a bit. It more goes into Tidus's dad and Yuna's dad and what Sin is, rather than Seymour. And then you fight him again, and you finally. But I was like, why am I still fighting? I completely forgot about him, to be honest, when I was in Sin. I had to do the final fight with him. It's just, yeah. I think they were trying. It was kind of like they were doing the whole Final Fantasy thing where you think there's a bad guy, and it turns out he's sort of controlled by somebody else, and then that's the real bad guy. But it was kind of happening at the same time, so you knew you were going to fight Sin, and then Seymour kind of got less and less relevant because you kind of kill him twice. Yeah, you kind of kill him, and then you actually finish him off. And I think they could have done more with Seymour. I mean, for me, the game feels really short. It's meant to be one of the longest games, but it didn't. It felt quite short. I don't know. I don't know how many discs it's on the PS2. If you know, let me know. I'd be interested to know how many discs it actually was, because one disc on a PS2 might be 2, 3 on a PS1. I don't know. So therefore, it might be the same sort of sense. But anyway, but yeah, the story. I think the first third is really interesting. Tidus appears and he's learning all these things, and obviously you're learning at the same time. The final third is really good, generally. And the final third is quite good as well, because that's the bit where you do the actual fight. But there's sort of middle third where you beat Seymour, you become outcast, and then you decide to take Sin on, and then like Seymour's irrelevant, and that bit drags a little for me. I have to admit, it did, or at the very least, I don't really remember it that much. But I would say also not that happy with the final boss fight. It was very Final Fantasy X-ish as being a gimmick fight. You can't die. You can't die in the final boss fight of a Final Fantasy game. How stupid is that? You have permanent auto life. And I died a lot when I was fighting the Aeons. Died a lot. Go check it out. But yeah, no, you can't die. You just you keep coming back to life. So effectively, you just have to instead of like when I was saying with some of the gimmick bosses, you would die and then eventually you'd learn how to do it. But that'd be frustrating. The final boss, you can just keep going at him constantly, and it was so rubbish. It really was rubbish. I know I complained about X Death the last video on Final Fantasy V, but that was just easy. This was just stupid, to be honest. What I would say is that if you take a step back, the story as a whole is quite good, because I enjoyed doing the extra reading of it, so that is a good sign for me. It wasn't like I was just doing it because I had no idea. I quite enjoyed it. I think I would recommend going and reading it if you're interested in the story. I think it's really good. So yeah. But anyway, let's get down to conclusions. What did I think to Final Fantasy X HD Remaster? Do I think is as high as everyone else ranks it as one of the best Final Fantasies? I think 7 and 6 seem to be the best, and then I find that 10 quite often seems to be the next one. No, I don't think that at all. I'm slightly biased because I love Final Fantasy VIII. I'm one of the weird people who loves Final Fantasy VIII. But yeah, I mean, it's not just that. I like the PS1 ones. I like all the PS1 ones, in my opinion. I like the fact there was more strategy, but then I found a lot of it needless. And like I said, I don't like the gimmick bosses. I don't like the gimmick. I just want to get strong and powerful and kick everyone's ass. Where some of those, it wouldn't really penalise you if you did that, but like it didn't make it any easier to be stronger, which just seems so stupid. I'd say it's better than probably Final Fantasy 1 through 5. I've not played 6 yet, so 1 through 5. Obviously, it's quite hard to compare like a Nintendo Entertainment System and a PS2 game. But, story-wise, considering their limitations, I still think it was a better developed story. But I'd put the 3 PS1 ones above it. 7, 8, 9, I think they're still above it. You'll have to wait and see for my rankings of them 3. You will. That will come when I've played all the Final Fantasies. It has its exciting parts. It does, all the strategies and things like that that's new. But what I would say is the first PS2 Final Fantasy game, I can see where they've taken the game. I can see the steps they've made, and it's exciting. It's not worked personally for me, but I liked how they, instead of just going, oh, well, we can do better graphics and slightly longer game, they've gone, what can we change? What can we change? What can we add? And they've taken all these bits and they've added all these little bits, and I think it's really exciting for what maybe then the next Final Fantasy games will be. Obviously not 11, because you can't get that, but 12 and 13. I'm excited to play those. I think they could be really good. I think they might be PS3 games, or was 12 PS2? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But yes, I think that's the most important thing, that they've taken the series forward. A bit like how Final Fantasy VII moved it forward from, the originals, the first 6. I think It's important that the next evolution takes it forward. But yeah, the fact that the game keeps evolving, and that's what keeps it fresh. And you're not going to like them all, but I think it's still a good game. Play it if you've not played it. If you have played it, let me know below. And thanks for listening to me waffle. I do love a little waffle. I create a nice little review, and then I don't always stick to it. I talk about other things that pop into my head. But yes, guys, thank you ever so much. Please do subscribe to the channel. Let me know below if you've played it, what you thought of it, what you thought to the series if it was the first time seeing it. And definitely hang around, because like I said earlier, play Final Fantasy 7. The original. Yeah, so that's coming up. I think hopefully the day or two after this video should be up. So yeah, guys, I'll see you soon. Cheers.